My name is Emerson. 36 years old, living in Chicago. I once thought I had a stable marriage after 15 years together. But one ordinary morning in the bathroom, I discovered that the expensive shampoo bottle was nearly empty even though I had bought it only 2 weeks ago. My husband had been bald since 35, he certainly wasn't using it. So who had stepped into this house, used even the most intimate things of mine, and then left as if they had never existed? The feeling of realizing traces of another woman in your own bathroom. Can you even imagine that? If it were you, would you stay silent and watch or confront it right away? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay with me. Because the story I'm about to tell will make you see clearly. Sometimes betrayal begins with the smallest details. Grant was always admired by everyone. With closely cropped salt and pepper hair, thin-framed glasses, and a confident half-smile, he embodied the type of man who had it all. Successful, educated, and according to our friends, living a model marriage with the most intelligent and thoughtful wife they had ever met. Cocktail parties, career seminars, company Christmas events. I was always there, standing by his side, politely shaking strangers' hands and nodding at the empty compliments everyone knew weren't completely true. I was used to standing next to my husband as if I were a refined accessory, not too striking to outshine his aura, but charming enough that people had to admit, he really is lucky. I didn't think it was the role I had ever dreamed of, but it came naturally as if I was born to fill the space beside a man like him. A man who walked into a room with a presence that made others instinctively step aside. We once tried to have children. 4 years ago I went through 2 rounds of IVF and 1 miscarriage at 11 weeks. Grant didn't blame me. He stayed silent, held me close and said one sentence. Maybe it's not the time yet. I thought it was his way of comforting me. But from that moment on, there seemed to be a sheet of frosted glass between us. Clear enough to see each other but not clear enough to touch the real feelings. We stopped talking about children after that. I learned to redirect maternal instinct into the plants I cared for every morning, the blogs I wrote for Grant's clients, the midnight calls with panicked customers drowning in deadlines. I was the one writing the words that made Grant look like he understood clients better than they understood themselves. The one picking every color tone for the new websites, every line of the slogans he read at conferences. The one monitoring every piece of client feedback to fine-tune his personal profile. But I never put my name on anything. I didn't see it as wrong, until I started to feel that my husband no longer looked at me the way he once did. I'm not talking about how he no longer brushed his hand lightly against my back when passing by, or how the morning hugs grew weaker or how dinners grew quieter. I'm talking about his eyes. There were moments I caught him looking at me, as if I were a stranger. As if he were trying to remember something about me he had already forgotten. And when he realized I was looking back, he would quickly turn away as if he had been caught doing something wrong. I used to think I was imagining too much. Maybe it was because I had been working from home too long, stuck in website projects, always emails, accounts, deadlines. I thought maybe I needed a trip, a change. But then came the nights he came home later than usual. Emergency meeting, he said, loosening his tie without looking at me. I nodded, poured more wine into my glass, then cleared the untouched plates on the dining table. Then the second night, the third. It's quarter end, chaos everywhere. But when I tried to ask about specific clients, Grant only mumbled and changed the subject. He no longer shared the little stories from his day. No more jokes about funny new coworkers, no more drafts of his speeches for me to edit. The small pieces of his life he once shared now seemed ripped away, kept somewhere I wasn't allowed to step into. Once I found a spa receipt in the stack of mail on his desk. Services for specialized shampoo, steam treatment and deep hair therapy at a salon in the Gold Coast area. The payer was Grant, at the exact time he claimed to be meeting the design team. I didn't confront him. I slid the receipt back into the bottom drawer. That night, I noticed a strange perfume lingering on his shirt collar. Not mine and not from any detergent I had ever used. It was only for a moment. But I remembered it clearly. Then came the towel with a red lipstick stain. I hadn't worn red lipstick since our wedding. And no one had visited the house recently. I began to feel like an audience, watching my own life unfold without knowing when the main character had been replaced. I didn't know exactly what I was facing. But I knew something in this house was no longer right. And for the first time in a long while, I stopped reassuring myself that every marriage fades eventually. I decided to do the one thing I knew better than anyone from my work. I would collect data. Not rushed. Not emotional. But precise down to every detail. I had once built a brand that hundreds of thousands of people trusted with image and words. I would do it again. But this time the target wasn't clients. This time the target was the truth. The camera I chose looked like a scented candle, white porcelain casing, gold rim, blending perfectly with the bathroom colors. No cords, no blinking lights. Fixed directly on the shelf above the sink, facing the mirror. The angle was wide enough to catch the door, the shower, and part of the glass cubicle. It took me nearly 3 days to find the right model. Not too cheap to glitch, not too fancy to attract attention. I had bought 3 others before this one. One had the wrong angle. One had sound but no image. The final one I picked, besides its discreet look, had a motion alert that sent recordings directly to my phone. No one but me knew it existed. The night I installed it, I wiped the bathroom mirror like always, replaced the towels, checked the shampoo and conditioner bottles I had bought from Italy, the kind with bergamot and fermented honey scent, light but long-lasting. I photographed each bottle from multiple angles, marked them with a clear nail polish streak in places no one would notice. Both on the bottle and the cap. The moment someone opened them, I would know. Everything was prepared like I was setting up a client photo shoot. Except this time, the subject was someone entering uninvited. I didn't tell anyone. No confiding, no diary. I knew that if I told anyone, even April, my best friend from college, I'd only hear the same advice. Are you sure? Don't assume without proof. I didn't want doubt. And I didn't want pity. I needed the truth. Not sympathy. On Friday morning, I told Grant I had an unexpected trip to meet a new client opening showrooms in the western suburbs. I made an excuse that I'd need to stay overnight to survey the space, take photos, and draft a branding plan. He asked one thing: "You sure you're okay? You've been working too hard lately." I smiled. "This one's light. I'll use it as a break. Change of air." "All right. Drive safe then." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, slightly off from the usual spot. I let it be. The cologne he used that morning wasn't the one he usually wore. Stronger, sweeter, the kind of scent I avoided because it gave me headaches. I set my small bag on the back seat, pulled out my phone, and switched on the live stream from the camera. Everything in the bathroom was still. I drove away from our street, turned opposite the highway exit, looped around, and stopped at a cafe less than 2 blocks from our house. I chose a corner table, sat with my back to the street, phone screen right in front of me. My cappuccino cooled with time, but I didn't blink. In the first 3 hours, nothing happened. Only the empty room, light filtering through frosted glass, the occasional hum of traffic outside, and the stillness of shadow. I began to doubt myself. Was I overreacting? Could it be? I was imagining everything. Maybe Grant really was busy and I was using loneliness to draw my own script of betrayal? Then my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Bathroom, 2:37 p.m. I tapped the screen. A figure had stepped into frame. Not Grant. A woman. Bright blonde hair, lightly curled at the ends, wearing an oversized white button-down, the kind that could only be Grant's. Barefoot. A leather purse set on the sink with that small crown logo I knew well. I had designed the brand identity for that company last year. She turned. Her face came clear under the light. I had never met her. But I knew the type. At least a decade younger than me. Skin cared for with medical treatments. A body maintained by Pilates and a 1,200-calorie diet. Eyes confident, almost defiant, even though she had no idea she was being watched. Minutes later, she stepped out of frame carrying a white towel, the kind I used every night. She moved through the room at ease as if she had been there before. She opened the nightstand drawer, pulled out a hand cream I had ordered online last month. Unscrewed the lid, rubbed on a thin layer, then smirked at her reflection. Every gesture was so natural. I shivered. This was not her first time in my house. About 15 minutes later, the door opened. Grant walked in holding a shopping bag from a downtown boutique. He set it on the table, went straight to the bed where she was lying, and said in a half-teasing voice, "Your weekend gift." She sat up, her hair still damp from the shower, a few strands clinging to the collar of the shirt she wore. His shirt. Jade, that's the name I heard when Grant leaned down and kissed her cheek. Jade Monroe. I swear no one could ever replace you. Jade giggled, slid her hand across his shoulder. Then, glancing at the mirror, she said, her voice sharp and clear. She has no idea, does she? He sighed, loosened his tie, shrugged slightly. Emerson's always buried in projects. Besides, she never notices anyway. My heart pounded, but my face stayed frozen cold. Jade pulled the bag open, lifted out a burgundy silk dress. She held it to her chest, twirled in front of the mirror. Beautiful. But are you sure she won't find out? Grant laughed. Emerson never opens my closet. Trust me. That sentence hit harder than any kiss. It wasn't physical betrayal. It was contempt. After 15 years together, I had been reduced to the one who never notices, an afterthought in my own home. I kept watching. Jade lay back on the bed, her head resting on his arm. Her voice soft but loud enough for the camera. Do you ever think about going public? I don't want to stay in the dark forever. Grant paused a few seconds, then answered. Not yet. He's still useful. He handles all the branding for me. If I drop her now, I'll lose more than I gain. Jade raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. She gave a sly half smile. Useful. Sounds like you're talking about an employee. Grant laughed with her. My throat closed tight. I thought I'd feel jealous, broken. Instead came a chill like a bucket of ice water poured straight over my heart. To Grant, I wasn't a partner anymore. I replayed the video 3 times, listening closer each time, engraving every word in my head. There was no denying it now. My phone buzzed again. A message from Grant. Work going smoothly? Miss you. I laughed out loud, sharp enough that the waiter nearby glanced at me. He had no idea that blocks away, Grant lay in bed with another woman, still texting his wife as though he were the image of loyalty. I shut my phone, leaned back in the chair. All the scattered pieces from the past months snapped into place. The fast-emptying shampoo, the red lipstick stain on the towel, the spa receipt, Grant's evasive eyes. Every one of them had an answer now. Jade Monroe. Her name was like a bold ink blot spreading across a fragile page. I didn't know much about her beyond what the camera had captured. But I knew one thing for certain. She had stepped onto my ground, taking not only my husband but the last shred of peace left in my home. Some women might collapse after seeing this. I didn't. They thought I was invisible. I would turn that invisibility into my greatest weapon. I replayed the footage, saved everything to a private cloud locked with a password only I knew. Then I renamed the file, Monroe Evidence 1. I knew this was only the beginning. From the day I held that first video, I never looked at Grant the same again. Every time he walked through the door with his familiar social smile, he looked like an actor rehearsing lines. I didn't speak, didn't confront, didn't show a hint. I chose silence, but it wasn't passive silence. It was the silence of someone watching and recording. At night, when he slept, I opened my laptop, logged into our joint bank account. The transactions glowed like scratches I had never noticed before. Grant still deposited his paycheck regularly, but small withdrawals appeared, repeated weekly, vanishing into another account. At first a few $100s, then a few thousand. Each time the notes showed only a string of numbers. I traced every mark. Finally, I found a new account under Grant's name, but the contact address wasn't our home. It was a rented mailbox in another neighborhood. I sat still, my fingers drumming the table. He wasn't only cheating, he was setting up an escape, secretly siphoning money away. One afternoon, checking our home mailbox, I found a cream envelope. Embossed silver logo, a luxury furniture store I knew well. I had consulted branding for them 5 years ago. Recipient, Jade Monroe. But the sender's address was our house. I heard a car pull into the street. Her name glared up at me from the same box I opened every morning. I carried the envelope inside, set it on the dining table. My heart pounded, not from shock but from the clarity of the picture forming. That night, Grant came home late. He hung up his suit jacket, pulled off his tie, went straight to the fridge for a beer. I slid the envelope across the table, voice steady. This was delivered by mistake. Addressed to Jade Monroe but sent here. He froze, eyes flickering before softening. Must be a post office mix-up. I'll take it back. I smiled lightly, nodded and pulled the envelope back. No need. I'll hold on to it. Return it tomorrow. His eyes blinked fast, calculating. Then he forced a laugh, wrapped an arm around me. You're always so thoughtful. I let it pass, but inside, another piece locked into place. The next day when he left, I opened the envelope. Inside was a receipt for an Italian sofa set, $11,000. Buyer, Grant Cartwright. Recipient, Jade Monroe. Delivery address, a luxury condo recently opened by the riverfront. A new condo. New furniture. A hidden bank account. A young woman. All of it painted a future where I did not exist. I scanned the invoice, stored it in a secure folder. Took photos, saved them to the cloud. Each piece of evidence stacked like bricks, building the wall to protect myself. In the weeks that followed, I uncovered more. Bills from fine restaurants we had never visited. Hotel receipts for nights matching his late work excuses. Perfume purchases delivered to our house but billed under Grant's name. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Grant with his laptop open, I pretended to bring him tea. Glancing down, I caught the screen. Not an architecture project. A legal forum. The thread title, Dividing Assets in Divorce, How to Keep the Majority When Your Spouse Has No Steady Income. He closed the screen the instant he saw my eyes flicker toward it. A client asked me to look it up. I nodded, smiling faintly. But inside I knew he was no longer hiding with finesse. He had gone too far to turn back. From that day I changed the way I observed. No longer noticing the half-empty shampoo bottles or the lipstick stains. I tracked the numbers, the receipts, the letters that conveniently arrived at the wrong address. Every small detail was another piece of evidence I carefully placed into a file on my computer. He thought I was still the quiet figure in the corner, the one who never paid attention. But I knew better. What hides in the dark can either shield or consume everything. I was no longer the wife waiting for her husband to come home and trusting his brief explanations. I was becoming the watcher, the collector, the recorder. And one day those very details he dismissed would be the ones that pulled them both down. I didn't leave right after I discovered the truth. I waited a few more weeks, still playing the devoted wife. I cooked meals, washed clothes, kept up enough conversation so he wouldn't suspect. I smiled when friends said, "You two always look so happy." Inside I had already decided. If they thought I was invisible, then I would vanish completely, without leaving a trace. The night before I left, I sat in the office until late. On my screen were all the accounts and access I controlled. The company website, the email system, the entire client database. Everything was in my name. I had registered and paid for it all from the beginning. Grant had never paid attention because to him, those were small details. I carefully changed the passwords, redirected the entire server into private mode. When he woke up the next morning, his company would no longer exist online. As for the joint bank account, I had already prepared. I contacted the bank, presented the documents, and froze the entire balance until the court made a decision. The bank manager called me. "Are you sure you want to freeze the account immediately? This is quite a large sum." I replied, voice steady, "I'm sure. And I am the only one with the legal right to do so." When I signed the file, my hand didn't tremble. That morning, Grant woke up calling out from the living room, "Emerson? Can you make me some coffee?" No answer. He grabbed his phone, tried to log into the company email. Error message. He tried the website. Only a blank page appeared with a single line, "This site is unavailable." Panicked, he called me. His phone only reached an automated voice. "The number you have dialed is not available." I had removed the SIM card, tucked it into a drawer, and driven out of the city at 4 a.m. before the sun rose. I rented a small apartment in the suburbs, giving the excuse that a long-term client needed me nearby. There I began part 2 of the plan. I dug deeper into Jade. Old records showed she had left behind plenty of broken ties. I selected former partners she had cheated, people who lost money or had contracts abandoned. Using a new account, I wrote polite emails. "I have information regarding Jade Monroe. I think you'll want to know." At first, some didn't reply. But one did. A fashion designer in Los Angeles who had once hired Jade as a model and then lost nearly $20,000 when she disappeared with a sample collection. He sent me the unfinished contract along with a note. "If you can expose this name, I'm ready to cooperate." I carefully logged it, saving everything. Within weeks, I became Jade Monroe online. Using her images, but instead of flirting or boasting, I sent contradictory messages. Contacting one partner, avoiding another. I sowed suspicion. Slowly, rumors spread. Jade was up to her old tricks again. At the same time, I anonymously forwarded a few legal documents to local attorneys, cases suspended in 3 states that I had dug up. I wrote nothing except, "Review this file, it may need reopening." I didn't need to accuse her directly. I only needed to pull back the curtain at the right moment, letting the victims speak for me. While I quietly moved the pieces, Grant began to spiral. One evening he called me from an unknown number, voice frantic. "Emerson, what's going on? The website's gone, clients are canceling contracts, the bank says the joint account is frozen." What did you do?" I listened but didn't respond. I set the phone down, letting his desperate voice echo into the air. Another time, while sitting at my laptop, I received a message from another strange number. "You think you can meddle in my life? Jay." I smiled faintly. Jade was finally sensing something. She didn't know where I was or what I knew. The feeling of being stalked by an invisible hand would keep her awake at night. I typed back one single line. "The wife you stole from was a branding expert. Are you sure your identity is still safe?" Then I shut the laptop, leaving the room in darkness. That morning I sat in my rented apartment, laptop open, screen split. One side showing a live feed from Grant's office building, the other an inbox with scheduled emails ready to send. I had timed them precisely, aligned with the moment his pen would touch paper. Grant entered the large conference room in a gray pinstripe suit, navy tie. Jade followed, hair-styled, body-hugging dress, high heels tapping confidently. They smiled, shaking hands like a power couple stepping into their next bright chapter. I sipped my coffee, watching calmly. The legal representative stood, preparing to hand Grant the pen. But just as he placed the folder on the table, an assistant walked in, delivering an urgent envelope. The room froze. "Apologies, we received additional documents from a former partner," the representative said, flipping through the pages. Seconds later, his face hardened. He looked straight at Jade. "Before we proceed, there's an issue to address. The woman accompanying Mr. Cartwright today, Jade Monroe, according to legal records, has been tied to at least 3 fraud cases, one of them in Texas. Here are the documents with file numbers." Jade jumped up, voice breaking. "This is a mistake." "I never," the representative raised a hand, firm. "You can explain in court. But today this contract will not be signed." At his words, 2 plainclothes officers stepped in. One read the arrest warrant. Jade struggled, turning to Grant. "Say something. They're destroying us." Grant froze, face drained of color. That sight, a woman brimming with arrogance minutes earlier, now handcuffed and led away, was the closing scene of a play whose script I knew by heart. Grant slumped into a chair, head in his hands. The representative closed the folder, voice heavy with disappointment. "Mr. Cartwright, I'm afraid we cannot proceed under these circumstances. Our company cannot be linked to a legal scandal." Grant stammered. I didn't know anything about her past." But as he tried to protest, the representative's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then looked back at Grant, voice even lower. "Another notice. The IRS has received files regarding your tax evasion and illegal withdrawals from your marital account. You'd better prepare to explain yourself." I knew that moment had arrived. My scheduled email had been triggered at the exact minute. On the screen, Grant looked around like a man lost. His eyes darted to the empty chair where Jade had been, then down to his hands. I could almost hear the reel in his head. The late nights, the secret transfers, the stolen kisses. He thought it was all discreet. But now, everything lay bare, right in front of the very people he needed most. I heard him mutter, hoarse, almost disbelieving, "Emerson, it was you." Though I wasn't in that room, I could feel his eyes searching for me in vain. I leaned back, fingers tapping the desk. No need to shout, no need to accuse. I let truth and the law speak for me. The last image before the feed blurred was Grant slumping over the table, one hand covering his face, while the partner's lawyer stood and left, abandoning him alone in that vast, empty room. And me, miles away, sat in silence in my small rented apartment, but this time I didn't feel lonely. It was more like a soundtrack to the opening notes of a new chapter, one where I alone held the rhythm. I left Chicago on a chilly early spring morning, when the trees had yet to turn green again. The car carrying me and a few boxes of luggage drove along the highway toward Asheville, North Carolina. A small city nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains with a slower pace of life, No dazzling lights, no lavish parties. I wanted a quiet place to start over. Not from zero, but from the foundation I had built with my own hands, only this time I would use it for myself. The little house sat on a hillside, white wooden roof, a balcony overlooking a valley covered in wildflowers. On the first morning there, I opened the window, inhaled deeply, the scent of damp leaves and pine resin rushing in. I had never felt so free. No more pressure to apply perfect makeup to walk beside an ambitious husband. No more rushing to edit his speeches or client files late into the night. I spent a few weeks arranging my life again. The living room became a design studio. A long desk, computer, digital drawing board, mood boards pinned across the walls. But unlike before, this time I wasn't working for Grant, nor hiding behind the name Cartwright Creative. I built a new brand, clean, simple, but deeply feminine and independent. My first clients were women entrepreneurs. A cafe run by two sisters, an independent fashion designer saving up capital, a young woman with an idea for a natural cosmetics line. They came to me because I understood what it felt like to be dismissed, underestimated. I didn't design logos and websites. I listened, I shared. One afternoon, while I was editing a design for a handmade jewelry brand, the phone rang. On the other end was Lydia, an old friend from the marketing world, now working for a well-known podcast that tells real stories of American women. Emerson, I heard you moved to Asheville. I have a proposal. We'd like to invite you on air to share your story. You can stay anonymous. We'll change your voice, no real names. You only need to tell your journey. The thought of laying it all out in public made me hesitate. But then I remembered the dozens of nights I sat alone, feeling like a shadow in my own home. If someone out there was living the same, didn't they deserve to know they weren't alone? All right, I said firmly. But I want one thing. This story isn't about pain. It's about rising without screaming, without loud destruction. Only with intelligence, patience, and a bit of wisdom. On recording day, I sat in a small studio room, headphones on, the red light glowing on the mic. The host introduced me with a pseudonym, The Stolen Wife. When they asked, I began to tell it all. Slowly, steadily, from the mysteriously vanishing shampoo bottles, to the necklace found under the sofa, to the sight of the blonde woman walking into my home as if she owned it. I told of my silence, not yelling, not smashing, but observing, gathering data, each bill, each money transfer. When I spoke of Jade, of Grant, I didn't tremble. I laid it out like a business plan. Objective, strategy, outcome. The host occasionally interrupted, gasping. You never felt so angry that you wanted to blow up? I smiled. Anger is easy. But anger only makes people defensive. I wanted them to destroy themselves. And I wanted to reclaim what they thought I didn't deserve. The podcast aired a week later, climbing quickly into the top 3. Thousands of comments poured in. Women everywhere saying they saw themselves in my story. Some confessed to living with husbands who secretly kept separate accounts. Others wrote, "Thank you for showing me that silence can be a weapon too." That evening, I sat on the balcony of my small house, the valley wind wrapping around me. My phone buzzed nonstop with interview and collaboration requests, but I only smiled faintly. I didn't need to be famous. I had found myself again, and that was the greatest reward. One day, a new client came carrying a folder. She was a young widow wanting to start a business to support her 2 children. Stepping into the studio, she said, "I listened to your podcast. I thought, if you could rise from ruin, then I can too. Will you help me?" I reached out and took her hand. Of course. That's why I started over. Not for myself, but for all of us. In that moment, I knew what had once been stolen from me. Home, trust, even the role of a wife, had become the very material to build a new life, stronger, steadier, untouchable. A year later, I stood in a sunlit room on the second floor of my studio. The walls were covered in color boards and half-finished logos from students. Before me were 8 faces, women of all ages, from a fresh graduate to a mother of 3 newly divorced. They sat around the long table, focused as I spoke about branding with honor. I wrote on the board, "Brand is not just what you sell, it's what you stand for." Then I turned back, looking at each of them. A brand only lasts if it's tied to the founder's true values. Don't think of profit. Ask yourself, what do you want others to remember you for? An older woman, Carol, raised her hand hesitantly. I want to ask, did you ever lose everything? The room went still. Their eyes were on me as if waiting for something beyond the lesson. I smiled softly, stepped closer, leaned my hands on the table, speaking slowly but firmly. No. I never lost everything. I only gave back what I didn't need. To take back what they could never steal. Myself. Some nodded, some closed their eyes as if to absorb each word. The air grew warmer, no longer just a technical class but a circle where each person was lit by truth. A young student, Emily, whispered, "So, what you mean is we can rise even when everything's taken from us?" I looked at her, eyes steady. Not even when. But because of it. Sometimes what's taken from our hands reveals the inner strength we forgot we had. The class continued with questions, tears, and laughter. When it ended, each one came up to shake my hand, a quiet thank you. I walked them to the door, watching them fade down the slope into town, my heart suddenly light. In the late afternoon, I stepped out onto the hill behind my house. The valley breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. I unclipped my hair, letting my newly dyed platinum strands fly free. In the mirror once I had seen jade, bright hair, proud stance. But this was different. This color wasn't imitation nor defiance. It was my choice, my symbol that I had turned pain into power. I closed my eyes, lifted my face to the wind. No more secret camera footage in my head. No more smirks of betrayal, no more bitter confrontations. Only stillness, freedom, and a steady heartbeat. And in that gusty twilight, I knew more clearly than ever. Sometimes the greatest victory is learning to live fully without letting anyone else define your worth. What do you think of my choice? Have you ever had to let go of what others thought was precious, just to keep the most important thing, yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear your perspective. Because sometimes one person's story can be another's comfort, another's strength. And if you want to continue listening to journeys filled with tears, resilience, and rebirth from family betrayals, hit follow. Many more stories await you, stories that might make you reflect on your own life and realize, sometimes from loss we find true freedom.